Hello, students. The purpose of this lecture is to go over how to really go ahead and craft an effective argumentative essay, just going over some of those more finite details. Some of these terms that you see listed on my screen right now, we have gone over in class, but I just wanted to take an opportunity in this video in order to contextualize them a little bit more for you. So logos, ethos, and pathos, the 3 points on my triangle, we have already reviewed in class. You've already seen this on the Purdue OWL. I have put these here because they are the most important aspects of rhetoric. I consider them to be the pillars of creating an effective argument. We have logos at the top, and this is for a reason. Logos is the most important rhetorical appeal that you can incorporate into an essay. Remember that logos is when you appeal to an audience's logic. You're guiding them through exactly what you think, why you think it, and why your audience should believe it. If you think about it, if you have ever listened to someone who is being irrational or illogical, or maybe you've read an article by someone and they're not making a lot of sense, most of the time you would probably lose interest and move on to something else, or you wouldn't really believe their argument and wouldn't take their side. And that's no good. That's why it's very, very important to be logical in your argument. At the bottom right corner, we have ethos, which is another important pillar of your argument. This is where you establish your credibility as a speaker or a writer. For those of you writing this essay, you establish your credibility by using credible sources, okay? Because again, think about it. If we think about it in terms of logos, you're not exactly going to agree with someone who is using sources from, let's say, Wikipedia, where anybody can post. Instead, you want to go ahead and do your research so that way you are implementing scholarly articles and other things that have been peer reviewed in order to establish your credibility and make your audience agree with you or believe your point a little bit more. In the bottom left-hand corner, there is pathos. And that, again, is the appeal to an audience's emotions. We want to pull on their heartstrings a little bit in order to get them to agree with our side, whether that means sharing a personal account of something, making a joke. Any of that can help our audience agree with us a little bit more. In the center of the triangle, we have a couple of techniques that are threaded based on these 3 pillars, okay? So there are specific techniques that you can incorporate into your argument in order to make it more effective. So avoiding logical fallacies is key. Remember, we want to be logical. We want our audience to agree with what we're saying and not just crumple it up and throw it in the trash because it just doesn't make sense. In order to do this, we need to avoid logical fallacies, okay, which are posted in the logical fallacies video. And you can also look at some logical fallacies in your e-text, okay? Tone is another big factor. So how we come across to our audience with our tone will greatly affect whether or not they choose to agree with us or not, okay? This really falls under the pathos pillar more than anything else. And then finally, we have rhetorical devices, which mostly fall under logos, but there can be a little bit of pathos thrown in there. And I'm going to show you what those are a little bit later. So as I mentioned, we have logos at the top. That is the pillar that is the most important, what we definitely want to incorporate into our argument. Throughout your argument, you're going to be making what are known as logical syllogisms in order for your audience to agree with you. This is also in the Purdue OWL resource that I've posted to the LMS. But I've gone ahead and I've given you a little example here. So a syllogism consists of three different items. We have two premises, both of which lead to a conclusion. Most importantly, a logical conclusion. Essentially, you are going to be making syllogisms throughout your entire argument, okay? Here's an example. Let's say that I'm against school uniforms, and that is my argument, okay? I want my audience to find this point, this belief, logically sound. So my first premise might be that any policy that promotes conformity over individuality should be abolished in schools. Okay, that does make sense. Premise two, what I have is B here. School uniforms promote conformity over individuality. Okay, so do you see how these two premises align with each other? We have in the first one that keyword conformity, and then we're using it again in the second one. I'm going to use these two premises to then make the conclusion that therefore school uniforms should be abolished. Okay, and so essentially my argument is stating if these things, these aspects exist, then XYZ must be true. Okay, and I'm going to show you a little bit more of ways to do that and what exactly that means. All right, so you're probably wondering, you're giving me all this information, but how do I structure it into an essay or a body paragraph? So your body is really the bread and butter of your entire essay. You want to put everything you have into creating an effective argument within your body paragraphs. So I found it very, very important to go over exactly what that looks like and some questions that you can be asking yourself as you are crafting this logical argument. So first, in our body paragraph, we have the claim, which is also known as the topic sentence. And you're going to be asking yourself, how does my claim / topic sentence connect back to my thesis statement? Okay, we want to make sure to thread those key words from our thesis statement and implement them into our body paragraph so that way our audience can connect the dots themselves. Okay, you are then going to implement some evidence. What can be incorporated? What can you use from outside sources in order to support whatever claim you're making? Okay, and then we have the reasoning, which should be the bulk of the paragraph. And you're asking yourself, how does the evidence support the claim? Why is it meaningful to the argument? Another way that you can look at it is through a syllogism. So if A and B exist, then C must be true. That is a logically sound syllogism. Okay, so essentially, you are explaining in your body paragraph how you got to C. Okay, so you can think of the evidence as your premises, okay, all of this good, credible information in which you establish your ethos, right? And then you're explaining to your audience why C must be true based on these premises. Okay, so that's just another thing I wanted to throw at you. Okay, and then finally, we have some rhetorical devices. These are not all of the rhetorical devices of the world. These are just ones that are used most often. You can use them in your essay in order to better establish your ethos, pathos, and logos. You will also see this. A lot of people make arguments using these devices, so it's important to identify them. Okay. So first we have a rhetorical question, which you've probably come across in your academic studies once or twice, maybe more. A rhetorical question is a question that is asked in order to create a dramatic effect or to make a point rather than to necessarily get an answer. So essentially, all it is, it's a question that really its objective is to just make you think. That's all. You don't really necessarily have to answer it. Um, it's more for you to just wrap your brain around. For example, on this billboard, we have why love one but eat the other? Choose vegetarian. Okay. So it's not really something you can directly answer. It's more just something to make you think less about eating meat and more about choosing veggies. Then we have a metaphor, which you, I'm sure, have come across before, and some of you have maybe even used in your narrative essays. So the definition is a figure of speech that, for rhetorical effect, most of the time, directly refers to one thing by mentioning another. Essentially, you're making a comparison. So I have a couple of written examples here. Winning Florida was the Bush campaign's holy grail. The widow was drowning in an ocean of grief. Or maybe even Serena Williams tasted victory after winning the first set. These things have not literally happened. Okay, so this is a figurative device that is used in order to make a point. We then have imagery, which I hope you used in your narrative essays, okay, which is visually descriptive language, putting the audience in the story or the argument with you in order for you to get them on your side. I'm not going to read this paragraph in full, but I just want to make note of some of the words that I've highlighted. These are sensory words, right? So the sweet smell of cinnamon and pancakes, the warm house, she had tired eyes, she had a red and swollen blemish. Okay, so this also plays a really big factor into tone and what you choose to do with your essay. We then have compare and contrast. This is used a lot in arguments, also in marketing campaigns, which are in fact arguments about why we as consumers should buy that product. So for example, in this diagram, Verizon Wireless clearly has more coverage than AT&T. So just by this visual example, Verizon Wireless is trying to say, hey, come work with us, come buy our phones and whatnot, just because we have more coverage than our competitors, okay? These are also just some fun facts that I've listed, which also are a way of comparing and contrasting. Falling coconuts kill 150 people each year, which is actually more than die from shark attacks. You're more likely to be killed by a champagne cork than a poisonous spider. Or maybe duckies kill more people each year than plane crashes. Okay, so really compare and contrast, logos, ethos, pathos, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to incorporate it as, it can be used for all three, okay, in order to bolster up your argument. Maybe by these fun facts, they're trying to comfort people into swimming. Let's say they're afraid of sharks in this first example. Maybe the fact that coconuts kill more people might make them feel better. I don't know. We then have cause and effect, which again is used a lot in argumentative writing. Essentially, cause and effect, if you want to think about it, is if X, then Y. Weight loss programs use this quite a bit. If you see this picture here, this ad is saying, if you join our weight loss program, then you will lose weight, just like the woman pictured here. I've given a couple of written examples as well. Prisons are overcrowded with nonviolent offenders, which leads to lesser sentences for violent criminals. Also, because of John Smith's failing economic policies, there's been an increase in the local homeless population. Okay, so that might be a part of some smear campaign or something like that. Okay, but all of these are examples of if this happens, or because this happened in the past, it led to Y. So if X, then Y. okay? It's kind of a little logical syllogism in a way, and that's why it's used so often. Then finally, we have counterargument and refutation. When using the classical method in your argumentative essay, which you are required to do, you will have to incorporate this rhetorical device. So it's very important that you understand it. So the counterargument is the argument that your opposing side makes. Let's say that you're against school uniforms. The counterargument is that school uniforms are actually a great thing to have in schools. So it's really important to recognize what other people are saying about your topic. So the counterargument in this example is that, let's say I believe that school should only be 9 months. We should keep it as it is. But Mr. Jones here says that school should be year-round. Okay, so that's the counter argument. I've listed it here. But then I need to provide a refutation as to why my idea is better. So in this case, I might say, Mr. Jones says that schools should be year-round. Okay, I recognize this point of the opposing side, but school should last for only 9 months because students need time off to do other things like play sports and go on family vacations. Therefore, year-round school is bad for students. Alrighty, so I hope this has helped you understand argumentative writing a little bit better. If you still have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email. Until next time.